Well, be phony and tell nice things to others, but she gives Mama a hard time all the time.
No, that's not the past. That's the present.
And, well, the different things I remember. Now, my sister was 6 years younger than I. And after my dad died, why, we slept with my mother in the same bed.
Mm-hmm.
And Mama always wanted Catherine, who was 6 years younger, to be in the middle. And she always complained that my legs are heavy. So evidently I moved around a bit or something, because she gave me such peace about my heavy
Legs.
Yeah. And then that other sister, why, she just wanted her near her. She thought that she had great legs. Let's see. Well, you have to, I'll think of different things at different times. That's why when, I ought to go through that thing that I did with you, and I don't know if I would change any of it that I did for Luke.
Mm-hmm. The paper you wrote for him?
Yeah. And so I can, and then you can tell me that I was really kind of a cheater.
Yeah.
And he wanted to interview me, and I thought, I think I could do much better to just write it myself than to have him interview it.
You got a good grade, too.
Yeah. And so when he turned it in, his teacher commented how much he enjoyed it. He said, go through the experience.
It was very authentic, I bet.
No, and it was told about people, the different things that they, did. And I guess he lived pretty much in that kind of a background and experienced some of those things that it seemed familiar. And like I said, he just kept, he gave a grade of 75 is supposed to be
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
This is what I'd like to know. I never knew that could ever be 100. Who in the world started that?
Well, that means there were 75 things he could have gotten wrong, but, you actually got them all right. So that's 75 out of 75. And the percentage of that is 100. It's kind of funny.
Is it? Well, anyway, I know that, a lot of my living, as I began to be, older and even, first married, well, it was pretty much almost like remembering the youth with my mother, just like making this starch. We did starch our clothes, and so then we'd hang them out. And another thing is about, in the wintertime, why, we would hang the clothes in the house, but you had just to heat from a stove.
Like my dad does in the basement?
Well, he just like he hangs up there in the basement, but we did it in the house. We didn't have, he's got heat.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would,
Your house wasn't
and
heated?
So, no, just one stove, In fact, I used to sit on top of the second floor had like a register, sort of, I don't know.
Radiator?
Well, it had not, just a flat thing that was put over an opening, and we'd sit on top of it, so as the heat would come up from the stove that we had, it was round. I'll have to sometime get and think what we called them. And then we would have, connected with it, like pipes. What do you call? See, I'll have to get together with somebody who's got a better memory about what we called things. And so then that would, would elevate, and the heat would be coming out of that. And in fact, we would put like asbestos or something up in that ceiling, to prevent that we would have a fire. And
You wouldn't do that anymore.
no, because we think asbestos isn't a great thing.
It causes cancer.
Yeah. And anyway, I know that. Another thing that I really remember comes to my mind is that my mother always, well, I was the oldest one, and so she wanted me to do things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But she never made me do anything, but once I did it, it was mine forever. So it was a job that I really, I guess I didn't know any better than to know that once I would show her that I could do something, that it would be my thing to do all the time. So then I would go upstairs and I would that day I would read True Companion or something, you know, they were kind of like magazines or, you know, that they had, and that would be, it would be sort of like sexy or something that to an extent. And then I used to read it. And I went upstairs and I'd go lay on the bed and read that book, and I thought, you know, and I didn't want, you know, wanted my mother to think I was working. So I would just go with my feet, pound my feet as if I'm walking through the, you know, like if I'm working. And so she didn't know that I'm laying down and just reading a kind of a sexy magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that she would never let me have a key to the house. You know, if we would be gone, even when I was like a teenager, she wouldn't let me have a key that I could enter the house. So when she'd open the door, I would sneak toward the clock. You know, she didn't put on the light, so I'd go to the clock and I would change it. I don't quite remember exactly when I turned it, made it the right time and changed it back, but I, you know, changed the time so that she thought I came in earlier. And then let's see. Oh, I can remember that we used to play off and on. In other words, what that was. And you didn't hardly have any cars or anything like that. Just maybe two people might have one, and that even just came in the area. And so the street was ours to play. So when we would get on top of the curbing, and one person would, you know, signal off or on. And then if he catch you, you know, if he would say off and you're on, or, you know, or either say on and you're off,
Mm-hmm.
then you'd pay a, you know, penalty. And usually, and sometimes these penalties were that whoever it was that you went in that, you know, like I say, that maybe, well, then what you really did, then you took the place of this person. But there were some things we also played that I can remember, and that it was then the person who lost owed the person a kiss, you know, and so they went in kind of a private little area, and I can remember saying to that person, now just pretend like you're going to kiss me, and they always seemed to be satisfied, so apparently I didn't appeal to them because they were satisfied not to kiss me. See, I'm going to think of a lot of little different things, but nothing like I said, when you're thinking and writing by yourself, sometimes you need to get these thoughts and get them in line. But I know I was only about 6 years old, and my godmother, you know, she was well, you know, when well, you know what we call a godmother, somebody that took you to church.
Was she like a friend of your mother's?
Yeah, she was like a friend of the family,
Mm-hmm.
but she was like a sponsor, you know, we called her godmother. And then when she'd leave, she would kiss me, and I can remember going in a corner and wiping my lips, because somehow or other, I at one point or neither. Well, I guess I was led to believe that it's kind of that you pass on germs to a person with kissing, and so I can remember doing that. And this was really a very well dressed lady. Wouldn't be anybody that you would be fearful of touching you. And so
Were you afraid of getting sick a lot when you were younger?
I don't think I was so afraid of being sick, but I didn't try to expose myself to things. And then another thing that I can remember in particular is that I always, I imagine that's why even to my current life, that I try not to show pain. And if anything hurts or anything, I'm not going to advertise it to anybody. It's just something I know. And then I would, and I think what kind of started that, and even when somebody would even want to tickle you or something, I didn't react to anything. And in fact,
Stoic?
and then we had my mother had 4 garages, and I used to take and put my head and hit it on the concrete to show I could take pain. And so
Why don't you tell her about all the chances you had to get married?
oh, you mean when
You got lots of them.
the thing I was saying that I went to Albert?
Well, I just mean you had a lot of chances to get married.
Well,
You had the shoe salesman.
yeah, I did.
Tell all your chances.
And then
We're
the
like
shoe
you.
salesman came to our house, and and Mama said in Slovenian, she said, "Kaj je vrak spet prišel?" That means, did the devil come again? And
Tell him
then
about his long fingers. That's what you like.
and he asked me, what did she say? And I says, well, she just asked if the devil came again. And then he asked me that same evening, he said he would become a Catholic, and would I marry him?
How old were you?
Oh, I was already out of, I had kind of finished high school. And then I told him, I certainly wouldn't somebody, to become a Catholic just to marry me. And I told him that isn't, because that I wouldn't be. And then he asked me, "Will you marry me?" And I said no. And then he dumped me. And he found somebody else. He was a pretty nice looking guy, and seemed sort of pleasant sort of person. And so I can remember seeing him a couple of days after that. So I said, you sure were able to get yourself another person very quickly, didn't you?
Was he the first guy who ever proposed to you?
No, there were different ones. Some of them even lived in Omaha, and they would come and visit, and so, and I can remember that I just don't know why they were interested, especially. Well, my peers, they went right to the factories to work, and I went. I did go to high school, and so I made myself in a sense, kind of more, at a different
Educated?
than they were. So I just don't, and then, consequently with going to high school, and that's what I did do, and then I seemed to have a pretty good taste for clothes and all that, and I don't know, that's where they just seemed to, be interested in me, but of course, I wouldn't be interested in them because they didn't really get an education.
Did
So-
Richard Kalich go to high school?
Yes, he went to high school. He went he went a couple of years high school, and then somehow or other, why, he was called to service.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did, we did get married, but I encouraged him to go on to college, and he did. And so
Was that before or after you were married?
after we were married, of course, he just went in, locally, like to,
Community college?
he went to, one is the one in Missouri now, the familiar one.
Mm-hmm.
The high school and college. There's, see, that's right, and I think that's it's kind of stupid for me not to think of, the name. And,
UMKC?
huh?
UMKC?
No, it was more, I think it was a Catholic school. And so,
Rockhurst?
yeah, see how stupid? Anyway, so then he went to Rockers, and then he just somehow or other, with his, he worked at Kalich, and he did well because that was in the beginning of IBM,
Mm-hmm.
and he, seemed to have, he was intelligent enough to be able to pick up on the system, and they right away sent him to give, he spoke in favor of IBM to different companies, and so he was easily employed in the capacity of knowing how to really set up IBM and get it going in it. But all the other people that were working already, they didn't have that. They weren't that qualified, that they would be able to do as well as he did. In fact, they used to send him even to give speeches and at different places, for IBM. And then in that day too, that unless you had to have intelligence, you had to be 29 years or younger for them to even employ you. And so he was also a person who could get the best out of people. He could really, a person was a genius. He could really get him to continue to be a genius.
Oh.
And so he had that ability to
Good leader.
to people to get that they grew in there. So, and it was, it was a time that but then his parents needed him, so that's why he sort of left school for a while. But then I saw to it that he continued and continued to be educated. And so, you get me thinking about a lot of crazy things. The first year of, I lived with, my in-laws, because they had a modern house. It was, in fact, it was the father, he's talking about building a new house, and then someone walked up the street and he heard him comment and say, "Oh, he's never going to have a new house." They didn't think that he had the money that he'd be able to. But he heard him, and so he felt challenged, and he did buy a new house. But then, of course, those were the bad days. And then
Depression.
Yes, and so you might be, not employed for a while. But anyway, but but there were Well, like I say, most of our peers just, they went right to the factory all right, but then, you know, some of us,
I think so.
Tell him about, tell her a funny story about when they cleaned the outhouse. Your
Oh.
brother and your father and
oh, yeah,
how he
well,
was cheap.
of course, we didn't have, we lived on the side of the street that only had outdoor, just like,
Toilets.
toilets, and you did
Hey,
not,
tell him you like to use the
you didn't
toilet
have
paper.
any water system or anything that would flush it or anything, and so, but, so after a while, you would, you know, the, which I had a half brother, then they would,
Paul?
Paul, and then they would, well, and then he had a brother who wasn't even with us anymore, it was another half brother, and he came and helped him to, you know, that he would clean the leavings out of the toilet, and so they, you know, got a hose, and his older brother got a hose, and he flushed it down with water, and Paul was in the back of that area as he was flushing it, and he slid down in that with that mess. And so, oh, and I can remember, you know, children were children in that day. It wasn't like the parents were so that watchful of us. They gave us a deadline of when the whistle, when a packing house, you know, was the meat packing house would blow a whistle at 9 o'clock. They knew they better get home.
Mm-hmm.
They had restrictions. And let's see. Well, you could stop sometime when I'm thinking, you know, let's see here. And then,
How old were you when your dad died?
I was 11. But that, my mother had to be thinking of just getting a job. She didn't hardly speak any English, so someone did help her to get employed. And she ended up, then she was quite, you know, a meat trimmer, and so she was like a carver and a butcher, so she was very, you know, quite, you know, like your spares and things like that, anything that had fat on it, well, she, you know, trimmed that away, and so she was got to be quite, you know, a good handler of meat. And
How did your dad die? I remember something about a shot he was getting from a doctor. An injection.
oh, an injection.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're talking about when I had that injury.
No, but you could talk about that.
Yeah, but let's see. When you said I got an injection.
No, not you. I thought like your dad did, or someone else.
Oh, when he died.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's right. I mean, he had double pneumonia, and he seemed like he's going to do better. And then the doctor came to the house, and he injected some form of a shot, and that elevated that he just leaped off the bed. He just, you know, his body was thrown up, and he fell dead. And I know this family all kept yelling at this doctor, you know, you killed him, and you know, you murdered him. And so the doctor never did send a bill. So whatever injection he gave him, it must have been at that time. They didn't have antibiotics or anything like that, and he just was probably injecting him with something. Just maybe someone in today's life could say what they thought happened more so than what we accused the doctor of killing him.
Mm-hmm.
And it might have been something that I think that you know, I think that your uncle, you know, your Dick, you know,
Uncle
that
Dick?
he could you know, explain to you what he thought happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in that time, why, you had the body was kept in the house,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they had put a kind of a wreath on our door, and then people would come and stay all night. It was just like, throughout the night, just like
Sit with the body.
uh-huh. And so then I know that there was a older person, his mother, and I don't know if the father or it was just the mother, came over and she stayed. Different people stayed all night. And of course my mother was there, but then they probably
Took turns.
were there, uh-huh. And so anyway, I can remember that when this was they put, when she was a female, was my age, with just about 2 weeks in the year. He was born, I was born February 20th, 1922, and he was in March. He was, it was the patron, my saint, Saint Francis of Rome. Well, he was born on that day. So we were put to bed. The adults were up and they put us to bed together. And I can remember giving a girl a hard time, the one that married him, and I used to tell her that I slept with her husband before she did. And so sometimes we'd be out and, like at a New Year's dance or something, and then she used to get a little annoyed at me. Didn't want to hear that anymore about me sleeping with her husband. So, let's see. What else were you? Asking about my finger?
Sure, you can talk about that.
Oh, well, my mother was not in the best of health for a while, and probably, I don't know what, if she was worried about getting herself together and exactly what it was that, whether she didn't have double pneumonia, but whatever she had flu, she had something, I don't know. So then people in the neighborhood, like, most of them went right to work in the factories. And like I said, right out of grade school. So then they would kind of encourage her to, have me seek employment. So they said they could help me get a job. Well, they did, and they says, and she asked them if it would be dangerous, and they said, no, there's no way. Well, this happened to be what they gave me a job. Although someone there was a young man, and he kind of got quite damaged on his hand while he was working. He was feeding, as you know, you had to go work quickly, and he was feeding the cans or something into this, and so he got quite an injury. Then they had me where I would be, I guess it's almost like a cardboard box, and inserting it into an opening, just like a circle thing, like that would, and you'd stick it in there, and then you'd push down with your foot, and then it would put ridges in, like ridges that you would screw a cap onto.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what I did is I put in that ridge and step the same time. So you were supposed to really do this at a speed. And so I happened to mash my finger. And then I can remember even saying, oh, I mashed my finger. I didn't say anything or fire anything. But then they decided, to take me to a doctor. And then, and my mother was, sick at that time at home. And then the doctor said, well, we think we need to amputate that because she could get it infected and then lose her whole hand. And that was the danger that there wasn't anything that they had in that they still didn't have any antibiotics or anything to help people, so that if some things went wrong or an infection set in something that you could get a big loss. Well, and then like I said, they did amputate it, and then after that the bandage and all that, they wrapped that whole hand, and I had to, for a month, I had to pour alcohol into that bandage all that time.
I bet it hurt.
To keep it from, from getting infected. And I can remember that I used to hide that finger all the time for many years, but then I guess eventually I quit hiding it. And
Let the dog out, Mom.
And I know that one of my later on, one of my grandchildren, that they
Nick?
yeah, then Nick, he asked me what happened to it, and I just I just told him, well, I pointed it at
Woodpecker?
yeah, woodpecker, and he thought it was wood. And then he would tell his very young friends, and and then he was very disappointed that I told him something that was just a tales.
Mm-hmm.
And but I can remember the same young man. He was just a youngster. He'd answer the door when I'd come, and he'd ask, "Who is it?" And I said, "Me." And then I didn't realize that when they start calling me Mimi, it never occurred to me it's because that's what I said. When they, I would have a way of repeating a word that I seemed to have. That was some of my behavior, and so I just said, me, and so pretty soon I got to be Mimi. And I guess I've kind of been Mimi, and I think that I grew up, I know my mother wanted to be called Mom by her daughter-in-laws, and well, that didn't exactly bother me, but anyway, that I know that, I just, let's see, what am I trying to say now? That I made a point of, getting them, not exactly understanding, but I accepted, for all of them, just to call me Mimi rather than to think that they should be calling me Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Your daughter-in-laws?
yeah. But in that day, the people were pretty much so that they felt that they should be called Mom, and that I didn't exactly need that. So, let's see.
You were telling me about how I remember a while ago about how you had that fight with your brother Paul.
With Paul?
Mm-hmm. And he left.
Oh. Well, Paul, my half brother, and we got along just fine. I liked him a lot, and in fact, he'd take me with a date. He'd also take me with them. He didn't have a car. His friend had a car. His friend would have a date, and he would have a date, and he always chose to ask me to come along. And but and then that kind of reminds me that one person, he had once been to Omaha, Nebraska, and they came back and they brought some, I think it was jar of cherries that the aunts made, and he came to my house, and here I was, quite younger than he. I don't know if I was about 6 or 7 years younger than he, and he wanted to get me to go down